The Unseen Architect, Chapter 1, The Blueprint of Betrayal. San Francisco, California, 2024. The chill of the Pacific air carried the faint scent of eucalyptus through Sofia Martinez's spacious, minimalist apartment. At 60, Sofia was a woman of quiet strength, her silver hair often pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes, though lined with experience, still holding the spark of an innovator. She was the CEO of Aurora Tech, a burgeoning startup rapidly making waves in the renewable energy sector. Her current success was hard-won, built from the ground up with relentless effort, profound intelligence, and a resilience forged in the fires of betrayal. Just 5 years ago, at the peak of her previous venture, Nexus Innovations, a company she had conceptualized, built, and poured her very soul into, her life had imploded. Her husband, Mark Davis, the man she had trusted implicitly, the man who had supposedly been her partner, had blindsided her with divorce papers. The shock of the separation was quickly eclipsed by a more devastating revelation. During the initial discovery phase of the divorce proceedings, every asset of Nexus Innovations, the patents, the intellectual property, the bank accounts, the very ownership of the company she had founded, had been quietly, meticulously, and illegally transferred into Mark's sole name. All of it. The company's legal structure, once a blurry concept to Sofia in her single-minded focus on innovation, now stood in stark, brutal clarity. It was Mark's. Not theirs. Not hers. Sofia, the architect of Nexus Innovations, the brilliant mind behind its core technology, the tireless engine that had propelled its growth from a garage startup to a multi-million-dollar entity, found herself utterly destitute. She had poured every ounce of her energy, every brilliant idea, every sleepless night, every single cent she had into building something extraordinary. And in a single, gut-wrenching moment, she realized she owned nothing. The man she loved, the man she trusted, had taken it all. It was a blueprint of betrayal, meticulously drawn, leaving her with an empty landscape and a hollow ache in her soul. The memory of that moment still brought a cold sweat to her brow. The disbelief, the humiliation, the profound sense of violation. It wasn't just about the money, though that was certainly devastating. It was about the theft of her identity, the erasure of her contribution, the profound betrayal of a shared dream. She had built it all herself, and he had taken it all, leaving her with only the bitter taste of ashes and the daunting task of rebuilding a life from the wreckage of a trust shattered beyond repair. Chapter 2. The Spark of Genius. My journey into the world of technology began long before I ever met Mark Davis. As a child growing up in a modest home in Los Angeles, I was fascinated by how things worked. While other girls played with dolls, I was dismantling old radios, trying to understand their inner mechanisms. My parents, both hard-working immigrants, instilled in me the value of education and perseverance. Sofia, my mother would say, "Your mind is your greatest gift. Use it." I devoured books on engineering and physics, spending countless hours in the local library. I saw problems, and my mind instinctively sought solutions. My ambition wasn't driven by a desire for wealth or fame, but by a profound need to create, to innovate, to make a tangible difference in the world. I believed in the power of technology to solve real-world problems. I pursued electrical engineering at Stanford University. A scholarship student, navigating a world of privilege with quiet determination. It was a challenging environment, but I thrived on the intellectual rigor. My mind buzzed with ideas, especially in the nascent field of renewable energy. The late 1990s were a time of rapid technological advancement, and I saw immense potential in sustainable solutions long before it became a mainstream focus. My senior project, a groundbreaking design for a highly efficient, compact solar energy conversion system, garnered significant attention. It wasn't just theoretical. I had built a working prototype in the university lab, spending countless sleepless nights refining its components. This was the spark of genius, the genesis of what would later become Nexus Innovations. I envisioned a future where clean energy was accessible and affordable for everyone. After graduation, I secured a coveted position at a leading tech firm in Silicon Valley. I learned the ropes, understood the corporate landscape, but my own innovative ideas felt stifled by bureaucracy and slow decision-making. I spent my evenings and weekends refining my solar energy concept, sketching designs, writing code, meticulously planning every detail. I knew I had something revolutionary, something that could truly change the game. My younger sister, Elena, always my closest confidant, saw the fire in my eyes. "Sofia," she'd say, "you're meant for more than this corporate grind. Your idea, it's brilliant. You have to pursue it." Elena, a budding artist, had a keen intuition, often seeing things I was too focused to notice. It was at a tech conference in San Francisco that I met Mark Davis. He was charming, charismatic, effortlessly confident. A business major, he spoke eloquently about venture capital, market strategy, and the art of the pitch. He was exactly what I felt I lacked: the business acumen, the ability to navigate the cutthroat world of startups. I, the engineer, the inventor, was a whirlwind of technical brilliance, but a novice in the world of finance and legal structures. Mark was captivated by my solar energy concept. He listened intently as I explained the intricate details of my prototype, his eyes shining with what I then believed was shared enthusiasm. "Sofia," he'd said, his voice smooth and persuasive, "this is revolutionary. This is a billion-dollar idea, but you need someone to handle the business side, the legalities, the investors, someone who understands how to build a company around your genius." He presented himself as my ideal partner, the perfect complement to my technical prowess. He painted a vivid picture of us, a powerhouse duo, combining my innovation with his business savvy, conquering the renewable energy market. I, naive in the world of corporate finance and blinded by his charm and seemingly unwavering support, believed him completely. He was everything I thought I needed to bring my spark of genius to the world. He was the key, I thought, to unlocking my vision. The blueprint for what would become Nexus Innovations was beginning to take shape, but little did I know, he was already drawing in the fine print. The Faustian bargain. The initial days of Nexus Innovations were a blur of exhilarating work and boundless optimism. Mark and I rented a small, cramped office space in a building in downtown San Francisco, its windows overlooking the bustling city. I spent every waking hour developing the technology, refining the core product, building new prototypes. I lived and breathed Nexus Innovations. My mind raced with algorithms, material science, and efficiency metrics. True to his word, handled the business side. He schmoozed with potential investors, crafted impressive business plans, and navigated the labyrinthine world of legal paperwork. He was charming, articulate, and utterly convincing. He spoke of our company with such passion, I never doubted his commitment. It was during these early stages that Mark brought up the issue of company structure. Sophia, darling, he'd said one evening, holding a stack of legal documents. For tax purposes and for attracting venture capital, it would be much simpler if one of us held the primary ownership. As the face of the company, dealing with investors and legalities, it makes sense for it to be me. It simplifies the paperwork, streamlines the process. We're a team, after all. It's just a formality. Everything we build is ours, together. Remember hesitating for a fleeting moment. A tiny whisper of unease in the back of my mind. But Mark was so persuasive, so utterly confident, so seemingly logical. He explained it in terms of legal efficiency and investor confidence. He painted a picture of a future where we would be wildly successful, swimming in shared wealth, and this was just the small, necessary hurdle. My focus was always on the technology, on bringing my vision to life. The legal mumbo-jumbo felt like a tedious distraction. He was the business expert. I trusted him, blindly. Of course, Mark, I'd said, signing the papers without a second glance, my mind already racing back to a circuit board I needed to reconfigure. Whatever you think is best for the company. He smiled, a triumphant, almost imperceptible gleam in his eyes that I completely missed at the time. That's my girl, he'd said, leaning in to kiss my forehead. Always trusting my judgment. We're going to build an empire, you and I. It was a Faustian bargain, made with the purest intentions on my part and with calculated deception on his. I handed him the keys to my kingdom, the legal ownership of my intellectual property, the very core of my life's work. I saw it as a temporary measure, a formality between two partners, two lovers, building a shared future. He saw it as leverage, a silent acquisition, the first step in his meticulous plan to claim my genius as his own. Over the next few years, Nexus Innovations blossomed. My solar conversion system proved to be revolutionary. We secured patents, attracted significant investment, and began to scale rapidly. I worked tirelessly, often clocking 18-hour days, leading the engineering team, overseeing production, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. I was the one problem-solving late into the night, the one innovating, the one driving the technological advancements that kept us ahead of the curve. Mark, meanwhile, became the public face of the company. He gave keynote speeches at conferences, charmed the media, and closed deals with impressive flair. He was often introduced as the visionary behind Nexus Innovations, a title he reveled in, while I, the true visionary, remained largely in the background, happy to let my technology speak for itself. I genuinely believed we were a team, that his public success reflected our shared triumph. My sister, Elena, visited me once. She saw the signs before I did. Sophia, she'd said, watching Mark charming a room full of investors. He talks a lot about his vision, his company, and you're always in the lab, working your fingers to the bone. Are you sure you're getting proper recognition, proper ownership? I dismissed her concerns. Oh, Elena, you don't understand how these things work. He's the CEO. He has to be the face. We're partners. It's all ours. My naivety, fueled by my singular focus on my work and my unwavering trust in Mark, was a thick shield against any unpleasant truths. But the subtle shifts began to accumulate. Mark became more distant, more controlling of the finances. He handled all investor relations, all legal documents, all contracts. I, consumed by the technical challenges, happily ceded control, believing I was freeing myself to do what I did best, innovate. The Faustian bargain was in full swing, and I, the true architect, was unknowingly building my own gilded cage, handing the blueprints to the very man who would eventually lock me out of my own creation. The foundation of betrayal was laid, brick by invisible brick, beneath the gleaming facade of our shared success. Chapter 4: The Golden Cage. As Nexus Innovations soared, so did the subtle changes in Mark. The charming, supportive partner I had known began to morph into something subtly unsettling. He spent more time on lavish trips, ostensibly for investor relations or market research. His attire became impeccably tailored, his watches ostentatious, his demeanor increasingly aloof. He was always busy, always on a call, always too important for mundane details. My own life, ironically, grew simpler. My days were spent in labs, in meetings with engineers, in the quiet intensity of problem solving. I was still the driving force behind every new innovation, every patent application, every strategic technical decision. I was the brain, the heart, the engine of Nexus Innovations. But Mark was the gatekeeper, controlling all the access, all the information, all the money. He had created a golden cage around me. I had everything I needed to innovate: a state-of-the-art lab, a brilliant team, unlimited resources for R&D. But all of it was under his control. I barely saw financial statements. When I asked, he'd wave a dismissive hand. "Don't worry your brilliant head about that, darling. That's my domain. You focus on the tech. We're thriving. Billions, Sofia, billions are coming our way." His words were intoxicating, a comforting lullaby that dulled the growing unease. I was making a difference. My technology was helping the planet. That was what truly mattered. The money, I believed, was just a byproduct, a shared reward for our shared effort. Elena visited again, her concern more palpable. "Sofia, are you truly happy? You look exhausted. And Mark, he seems different." She had tried, gently, to probe about the company structure, about my actual ownership. But I, blinded by my tunnel vision and my unwavering, if misguided, trust, had brushed her off. "He's just busy, Elena. It's the price of success." My relationship with Mark became less about partnership and more about his increasingly imperious demands. He would criticize my appearance, my quiet demeanor, telling me I needed to be more polished, more visible, but only when he wanted me to represent the company in a carefully controlled environment. His compliments felt increasingly hollow, transactional. Then came the subtle signs of his private life diverging from ours. Late nights, vague excuses, a growing distance in his eyes. I dismissed it, attributing it to the pressures of running a burgeoning empire. I was too busy, too focused on my work, too invested in the dream we were supposedly building together to notice the cracks forming in our personal foundation. One evening, after I had secured a crucial new patent for a breakthrough in energy storage, I celebrated with my team in the lab. Mark was nowhere to be found. He had sent a perfunctory text, busy with something important, celebrate without me. A familiar ache settled in my chest. He was increasingly absent from the very milestones that marked our progress. The next morning, he appeared, impeccably dressed, his face a mask of practiced calm. "Sofia," he said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, "we need to talk. I filed for divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Divorce? After all we had built, all we had shared? My mind reeled, trying to grasp the sudden, brutal shift. I sat there stunned, watching him. He spoke of irreconcilable differences, of growing apart, of needing different things. His words were cold, rehearsed, impersonal. But the true bombshell, the real blueprint of betrayal, came later, during the initial discovery phase of the divorce proceedings. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Lee, laid it out for me. "Mrs. Martinez," she'd said, her voice grave, "I've reviewed the company documents, the incorporation papers, the investor agreements, all of it. And I'm afraid I have some very disturbing news. Mark Davis is listed as the sole owner of Nexus Innovations. The intellectual property, the patents, the assets, all of it is in his name." You own nothing. The words echoed in the sterile conference room, bouncing off the polished walls, each syllable a hammer blow to my heart. You own nothing. The golden cage had vanished, leaving only a barren landscape. I stared at Mrs. Lee, her words incomprehensible. But that's impossible," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "I built Nexus. I created the technology. It was our company." Mrs. Lee's face was etched with sympathy. "He structured it meticulously, Mrs. Martinez. He took advantage of your trust, your focus on the technical side. He ensured every legal document, every signature, pointed to him as the sole proprietor. He manipulated the system, and you, with cold, calculating precision. The realization hit me with the force of a tsunami. My naivety, my blind trust, my relentless focus on the invention had made me vulnerable. Mark hadn't been my partner. He had been my predator, meticulously crafting his escape, ensuring he would walk away with every single asset I had created. The golden cage had always been a trap, and I, the unseen architect, had unknowingly designed my own undoing, handing the ultimate control to the very man who would leave me with nothing but the bitter ashes of a life's work stolen and a heart shattered beyond immediate repair. Chapter 5: The Ashes of Ambition. The aftermath of Mark's betrayal was a descent into a desolate landscape of despair. My apartment, once a vibrant space filled with blueprints and design sketches, felt like a tomb. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the ringing of Mrs. Lee's calls, each one bringing more grim details of Mark's elaborate scheme. He hadn't just taken the company, he had stripped me of everything. Our joint bank accounts were drained. My personal investments, supposedly managed by him, had vanished. My credit cards were maxed out. He had planned every detail, leaving me not just emotionally shattered, but financially ruined. The anger was a searing inferno, burning through my veins. How could I have been so blind, so incredibly, profoundly trusting? The shame was a corrosive acid, eating away at my self-worth. I, the brilliant engineer, the visionary, had been reduced to a naive fool, manipulated by a man who had clearly seen me as nothing more than a means to his own greedy ends. My sister Elena flew to San Francisco immediately. She found me huddled on my sofa, surrounded by legal documents, my eyes red-rimmed and hollow. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply held me, letting me cry, letting me rage, letting me grieve the loss of not just a marriage, but a stolen dream, a betrayed identity. "Sofia," she said, her voice firm, "he didn't steal you. He stole your assets, your genius, your talent, your spirit. Those are still yours. He can't take that." Her words, though comforting, felt distant, almost unreal. How could I believe in my genius when I had been so utterly foolish? Mrs. Lee, my divorce attorney, was a warrior. She explained the immense uphill battle we faced. Mark had meticulously documented everything, creating a paper trail that painted him as the sole visionary, the sole owner, the sole risk-taker. My contributions, the countless hours, the intellectual property, the actual invention, all of it was legally erased, submerged under a mountain of carefully constructed legal fiction. "He's a narcissist, Mrs. Martinez," Mrs. Lee explained, her voice sharp with disdain. "They operate on a different plane of reality. You were a resource to be exploited, not a partner to be cherished. This isn't about you failing. It's about him being a predatory manipulator." Her words offered a sliver of clarity, a slight shift in perspective. It wasn't my fault for trusting. It was his fault for betraying. But the pain, the sense of being violated, remained. The divorce proceedings were a brutal public spectacle. Mark, charming and composed, spun a narrative of a detached, emotionally unavailable wife who had simply developed the technology while he built the company. He painted himself as the long-suffering spouse, forced to take drastic measures to protect his interests. The media, hungry for scandal, devoured it, portraying me as the cold, genius inventor whose husband had to step in to make things happen. The humiliation was unbearable. I saw former colleagues, even some who had worked directly under me, testifying to Mark's leadership, his vision. Some, I knew, were genuinely misled. Others, I suspected, were simply pragmatic, siding with the one who held the power and the money. It felt like a reenactment of the very lie Mark had constructed around me, amplifying my sense of isolation and injustice. David Chen, a brilliant engineer who had been my second in command at Nexus, was the only one who unequivocally stood by me. He refused to testify for Mark, even when threatened with professional repercussions. "Sofia," he'd said, his quiet voice filled with loyalty. Everyone in that lab knew who the real brains were, who put in the hours, who solved the impossible problems. "He's a fraud, and I'll tell anyone who listens." His unwavering support was a lifeline in the churning seas of my despair. The trial dragged on for months, an exhausting, emotionally draining ordeal. I fought tooth and nail, recounting every late night, every breakthrough, every moment of my single-minded dedication. Mrs. Lee presented compelling evidence of my technical contributions, but the legal framework Mark had woven was almost impenetrable. In the end, the verdict was a bitter, partial victory. The judge, while acknowledging my substantial intellectual contributions, upheld Mark's legal ownership based on the signed documents. However, due to the egregious nature of his deceit and the clear evidence of his manipulative intent, the judge awarded me a significant but non-ownership-related financial settlement. Enough to live on, enough to avoid complete ruin, but a mere fraction of what Nexus Innovations was truly worth, and a painful fraction of what I had earned. It felt like charity, a pittance for a lifetime of work. I walked out of that courtroom a ghost of my former self, the ashes of ambition. Once a roaring fire, now lay cold and scattered. I had lost the company, the recognition, the financial security, and perhaps a piece of my soul. The legal battle was over, but the emotional war raged on. The taste of victory was hollow, tainted by the overwhelming bitterness of a betrayal that had stolen not just my creation, but my very sense of self-worth. I was a phoenix, but I felt only ashes, utterly unsure if I would ever rise again. Chapter 6. The Phoenix Rises. The verdict, though a legal win in the eyes of some, felt like a devastating loss. I had walked away with a fraction of what I was owed, and the crushing knowledge that the company I built, my technological child, was firmly in Mark's grasping hands. The ashes of ambition felt cold and heavy in my chest. For weeks, I drifted, lost in a fog of despair. The idea of starting over, of rebuilding anything, seemed utterly impossible. My creativity, my spark, felt extinguished. Elena, my sister, refused to let me wallow. She stayed with me for months, cooking, cleaning, and most importantly, listening. She didn't preach. She simply provided a relentless, gentle presence. "Sofia," she'd say, "you are not Nexus Innovations. You created Nexus Innovations. Your brain, your talent, your vision, that's something he can never steal." Her unwavering belief in me was a lifeline. David Chen, my loyal friend and former colleague, also reached out constantly. He had left Nexus Innovations shortly after the trial, disgusted by Mark's behavior. He visited me often, not talking about work, but just about life, about books, about anything to lift my spirits. One day, hesitantly, he brought up a new idea. "Sofia," he said, "I've been thinking about that next-generation energy storage concept you were sketching right before everything happened. The one you called Aurora. It was brilliant, revolutionary. We could build it. You and I. This time, we do it right. Transparently, ethically." The idea was terrifying. Starting over, after such a brutal fall. The thought of putting myself out there again, of trusting anyone, felt impossible. The wounds were too fresh, the fear of betrayal too strong. But as David spoke, a tiny ember of my old ambition, long thought extinguished, began to glow. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative. It was about proving to myself and to the world that my genius wasn't dependent on Mark's validation or his name on a legal document. It was inherent. "We'd need funding," I said, my voice still hesitant. "And investors, they'll be wary after the Nexus debacle." "They'll invest in you, Sofia," David insisted. "Your track record, your brilliance, and this time with proper legal counsel, with complete transparency. We'll build it on principles Mark could never understand." It was a slow, painful climb. I spent countless hours in therapy with Dr. Anna Cooper, a compassionate and insightful psychologist. She helped me process the trauma, the shame, the profound loss of trust. She taught me to separate my self-worth from Mark's actions, to understand that his betrayal was a reflection of his character, not mine. "Your value, Sofia, is intrinsic. It is not defined by external validation or by the actions of others." Her words were a balm to my shattered psyche. Slowly, meticulously, I began to draft the blueprint for Aurora Tech. This time, every legal document was scrutinized, every partnership agreement transparent, every asset explicitly in my name and in David's. There were no more Faustian bargains. My trust was now earned, not freely given. Securing initial funding was challenging. Some investors were indeed wary, but my passion, my undeniable expertise, and David's unwavering belief in my vision eventually shone through. We attracted a small, dedicated group of ethical investors who believed in our mission and, more importantly, in me. Aurora Tech started modestly, from a shared co-working space. But fueled by my renewed drive and David's steady support, my innovative energy storage solution quickly gained traction. This time, I was meticulous about every detail, not just the technical ones. I learned about legal structures, about financial reporting, about protecting my intellectual property. I became not just the inventor, but a shrewd businesswoman. The phoenix was indeed rising, slowly, painfully, but with a fire in its belly fueled not by anger, but by an unshakable determination to reclaim my narrative, to prove my own worth, and to build something truly exceptional on my own terms. The ashes of ambition were now fertile ground for a new, stronger, and more resilient empire. Chapter 7. The Sweet Taste of Authenticity. Aurora Tech grew, steadily, organically, rooted in the principles of innovation, transparency, and ethical business practices. Unlike Nexus Innovations, which felt tainted by Mark's manipulation, Aurora was a pure expression of my vision. Built on a foundation of integrity, I was no longer just the inventor. I was a true CEO, navigating the complexities of finance, marketing, and human resources with a newfound confidence. The journey was challenging, but deeply rewarding. Every milestone, every new patent, every successful product launch felt like a personal triumph, untainted by the shadow of betrayal. David Chen, my co-founder, was an invaluable partner, honest, reliable, and deeply committed to our shared mission. Our working relationship was built on mutual respect and unwavering trust. He was the brother in arms I had always needed, and this time there was no hidden agenda, no quiet manipulation. My emotional healing continued in parallel with Aurora's growth. Dr. Cooper helped me to fully process the trauma of the divorce and the betrayal, to release the lingering anger and shame. I learned to distinguish between healthy trust and naive blind faith. My self-worth, once shattered, slowly pieced itself back together, stronger than before. I realized that my value was never dependent on Mark's recognition or the assets he stole. It lay in my innate ability to create, to innovate, to lead. The whispers of "I told you so" from certain acquaintances, or the veiled questions about what really happened with Nexus, never bothered me. I had nothing to hide. I spoke openly about the lessons learned, about the importance of protecting one's intellectual property, and about the insidious nature of financial manipulation in relationships. My honesty resonated with others, and my story became a cautionary tale, but also one of resilience and ultimate triumph. Years passed. Aurora Tech secured significant investments, not through Mark's flashy presentations, but through solid engineering, proven results, and my quiet, unwavering conviction. We launched revolutionary energy storage solutions that were more efficient, more sustainable, and more accessible than anything on the market. We were truly making a difference. Mark, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. Nexus Innovations. Without my constant innovation and technical leadership, stagnated. The news reports grew less flattering, speaking of declining market share, failed product launches, and dwindling investor confidence. He was exposed as what he truly was, a charlatan, a frontman who couldn't innovate. His golden empire, built on my stolen genius, was crumbling. The sweet taste of success was not about revenge, but about authenticity. It was about proving to myself that my abilities were real, that my vision was valid, and that I could build something lasting and meaningful entirely on my own terms. It was about the quiet satisfaction of seeing my intellectual property, my creations, thriving under my own name, owned by me, shared ethically with those who truly deserved it. The emotional resolution came not with Mark's downfall, but with my own internal peace. One day, I saw a news article about Nexus Innovations filing for bankruptcy. My initial reaction was a fleeting pang of something akin to vindication, but it quickly dissipated. There was no joy in his ruin, only a quiet recognition that justice in its own way had been served. I realized I had truly forgiven him, not for his sake, but for mine. Forgiveness wasn't about condoning his actions. It was about releasing myself from the chains of resentment and anger. It was about understanding that his betrayal had paradoxically forced me to discover my own profound strength, my own unwavering resilience. He had tried to break me, to steal my identity, but instead, he had unwittingly led me to build a stronger, more authentic version of myself, a self that was truly free. The sweet taste of authenticity, hard-won and deeply cherished, filled my life, proving that some things, like true genius and genuine spirit, can never be stolen. Chapter 8. The Unbreakable Spirit. The years that followed the establishment of Aurora Tech were characterized by a profound sense of fulfillment for Sofia. Her company soared, becoming a beacon of ethical innovation in the renewable energy sector. She mentored young engineers, particularly women, sharing not only her technical expertise, but also the hard-won lessons of her life. She stressed the importance of intellectual property protection, legal transparency, and most importantly, believing in one's own intrinsic worth, irrespective of external validation or the actions of others. Her personal life flourished too. David, her trusted co-founder, remained a steadfast friend, their bond strengthened by shared purpose and mutual respect. Elena, her sister, celebrated every victory with her, a silent witness to her sister's incredible resilience. Sofia's apartment in San Francisco, once a space of despair, was now filled with light, laughter, and the quiet hum of innovation. It was no longer a gilded cage, but a sanctuary she had built, truly, for herself. Mark Davis eventually vanished from the public eye, his name a footnote in the history of failed ventures. Nexus Innovations was acquired by a larger corporation for a fraction of its former value, stripped of the innovations that had made it unique. Sofia sometimes heard whispers through the industry grapevine. Mark was struggling, attempting to start new ventures that quickly fizzled out. His reputation as a manipulator, once carefully hidden, was now widely known. The world, it seemed, had caught up to the truth. But Sofia felt no schadenfreude. The bitterness, the resentment, had long ago dissipated. Her victory wasn't in his downfall, but in her own ascension. Her spirit, once broken, had become unbreakable. She had found a resilience she never knew she possessed, a depth of character forged in the fires of betrayal. She often reflected on the concept of true wealth. It wasn't about the monetary value of Nexus Innovations. It was about the ingenuity, the vision, the sheer force of will that had created it. Mark had taken the legal ownership, but he could never steal the genesis of the idea, the creativity within her mind, the relentless drive in her spirit. Those were hers, intrinsically, eternally, and with them, she had built something even greater. Sofia became a quiet philanthropist, investing in education and sustainable technology, focusing on empowering young innovators who lacked resources or mentorship. She used her wealth not for ostentation, but for purpose, for giving back, embodying the very values Mark had scorned. Her 60th birthday was a quiet celebration with David, Elena, and a few close friends. There were no grand pronouncements, no public speeches about her triumph, just a shared meal, heartfelt laughter, and a profound sense of gratitude. She looked out at the San Francisco skyline, her buildings gleaming in the distance, each one a testament to her talent, her perseverance. But the greatest monument, she knew, was not etched in steel and glass, but within herself, the blueprint of her own unbreakable spirit. The journey had been long, arduous, and marked by immense pain. But it had led her to a destination far more valuable than any empire: true self-worth, profound inner peace, and the unshakable knowledge that her true power resided not in what she accumulated, but in what she created, who she was, and the indelible mark she left on the world. A lasting testament to the fact that she had indeed achieved everything herself, and no one could ever truly take that away from her. The unseen architect had built an empire not of assets, but of resilience, wisdom, and an unbreakable spirit. Chapter 9: The Echo of Legacy. As the sun began to set over the San Francisco Bay, casting a golden glow over the city, Sofia Martinez sat on her balcony, a cup of herbal tea warming her hands. At 65, she had officially stepped down as CEO of Aurora Tech, handing the reins to David Chen, who had proven himself to be a brilliant and trustworthy leader. She remained an active board member, a mentor, and a source of quiet wisdom, but her days of relentless work were behind her. Her mind often drifted back to the past, but the bitter sting of betrayal had long since faded, replaced by a gentle, almost philosophical understanding. She saw Mark's actions not as a personal vendetta, but as a tragic reflection of his own emptiness, his inability to create, his desperate need to take credit for others' accomplishments. His was a hollow victory, built on sand, while her edifice, forged in adversity, stood strong and true. The legacy she built was multifaceted. Aurora Tech continued to thrive, revolutionizing the renewable energy landscape, its products now integral to sustainable living across the globe. But her most profound legacy was perhaps the one she unknowingly built within herself, a testament to the power of human resilience, the enduring nature of true talent, and the quiet dignity of reclaiming one's narrative. She had become an unintentional inspiration. Women from various industries, facing their own battles with inequality, manipulation, or self-doubt, sought her counsel. Sofia, with her calm demeanor and deep-set eyes, offered not just advice, but a living example of how to rise from the ashes, how to rebuild, and how to define success on one's own terms. Her relationship with Elena flourished, strengthened by their shared history and Elena's unwavering belief in her sister. They often spent evenings discussing art, technology, and the quiet joys of life, their conversations filled with warmth and genuine connection. Sofia had truly arrived at a place of profound peace. The initial shock of discovering she owned nothing had been transformed into the liberating realization that her true wealth lay not in assets or titles, but in her mind, her hands, and her spirit. She had achieved everything herself, not just once, but twice. The first time, she had allowed a predator to claim her creation. The second time, she had built an empire that was undeniably, authentically, and solely hers. The scars of the past remained, but they were no longer painful. They were wisdom marks, testaments to battles fought and won. They reminded her of the strength she possessed, the lessons she had learned, and the enduring power of her own will. Looking out at the twilight painting the sky, Sofia felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that had shaped her, for the friends who had supported her, and for the inner strength that had carried her through the darkest hours. The echo of her legacy resonated not just in the success of Aurora Tech, but in the quiet, profound satisfaction of a life lived with integrity, purpose, and an unshakable belief in herself. She had proven, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that her greatest creation was not a company, but the invincible, resilient woman she had become, truly by herself.